This is my happy opportunity to be here with Courtney Bugler for the Seeding Social Good podcast. My name is Katrina Van Huss. I am the founder of Turnkey for Good and have become I'm existing somewhere between a word that starts with an A, an activist right now. And one of the things I wanted to explore with Courtney is, how does advocacy change in today's environment? So Courtney Bugler, CEO of ZERO Prostate Cancer, say hi and then answer that question to get us started.
Chaos is being sown every day. Our job as leaders is twofold. Is one, to try to find order in the chaos. And I think some of that order is through real, authentic leadership and combating sort of misinformation and all of the shenanigans. And number two is that business as usual has to get thrown out the window. Because again, for better or worse, the federal government is not acting like business as usual. And I think one of our biggest challenges is I look around and I see a lot of organizations that are trying to sort of combat a 2025 challenge with like a 2012 mentality.
Interesting. So tell me, sort of baseline for us, what does the 2012 set of activities look like if we're trying to gain funding from the federal government or a positive legislative position from the federal government?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. And I'm going to say that I do this from a place of privilege in that our organization does not have federal money. And so I think that changes how we can approach things. Although our organization has a pretty strong policy shop, so we are doing advocacy. But there are organizations who are very reliant on federal dollars, or who are so large that under the executive order, could be investigated. And so therefore, they may have to behave slightly differently. For us, I think it means two things. One is not running from what has fueled us for so long, right? So at ZERO Prostate Cancer, we are very committed to health equity. We have not shied away from that. A month after the inauguration, we launched the largest initiative in U.S. history for prostate cancer, Blitz the Barriers. And most of it is a health equity-based initiative. It is based on those who are at highest risk and who are the most vulnerable, which for us is Black men, veterans, and people in rural populations. Other than maybe veterans, the statement of we are doubling down on our commitment to people in rural populations, and even just the world of sort of segmenting things into population is sometimes not looked kindly on now, and especially doubling down on our commitment to saving Black lives. That could be seen as scary. But I think that it's important that we lean into that. We cannot be shy around saying what our values are. We had a whole conversation at the beginning of the year about, do we scrub our website? Do we change our website? And we said no. And in fact, we just launched brand new core values for the organization, and they include inclusion. It includes courage and ambition. And so we think, and again, I'll say this is privilege, right? I have colleagues who are CEOs that are 90% federally funded. That's a different environment.
Yep.
But we cannot shy away from it as leaders. I was just talking, there was, we posted something about President Biden's recent prostate cancer diagnosis, and I posted something on my own LinkedIn. And someone made a disparaging comment, and I didn't delete it. However, I did address it head on. I said, we will not do that here. This is not the place for it. Prostate cancer is not red or blue. And people who have prostate cancer are people who have lives and families. We will not be doing this. You want to do that somewhere else? Go take that somewhere else. Yeah. And then someone replied, and sort of disparage the person who made the original disparaging comment. And I said, no, 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 you will not do that either. We will not, we can call out inappropriate behavior while also leading with respect, but we have to call it out.
In your organization, you said you have a strong shop, advocacy shop. Does that imply that it's not a separate 501c4? It's that you are inclusively a 501c3?
It is a 501c3. We don't have a C4, although in this environment, we have contemplated whether that is. And, you know, and that means that we are, we focus on the issues that are important to us. Now, I will say that we've adjusted, and at my urging, we used to really, it's not big, right? So we only have a few staff. We have some consultants that we work with. And we were very focused on prostate cancer specific activities. The Department of Defense congressionally directed medical research program, which at one point was giving $110 million to prostate cancer research. And we are very concerned about the sort of war on science that is being waged right now. We focused on, we had just launched a bill in Congress that was called the PSA for Him Act, which is about eliminating cost sharing for PSA tests for people who are at highest risk, which are predominantly Black men. You know, that had some great bipartisan support. I'm not sure where it's going to go now.
So when you think about, you know, 2012 to now, for an organization like yours that does not have a separate 501c4, what I'm hearing you say is you are not really getting closer to the line that crosses over into the activities of a 501c4, but you're fully exploring the activities allowed as a 501c3. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and I think we're expanding what we're doing. So we, for example, had not gotten involved, too involved. You know, we have a lot of coalitions in cancer around Medicaid expansion, for example. And prior to this year, Medicaid was something we sort of signed on to, but we didn't really make it one of our priorities. When we saw what was happening with Medicaid, it became very clear that it needed to become one of our priorities. We had some conversations where I said, guys, like, we have to live in an environment where all of our priorities, like, I'm not sure any of them are going to happen. We have to move into how do we save our priorities? And then also, how do we see in this environment, if there are priorities, you know, all of the cost sharing is great, but if there are thousands of people at risk of prostate cancer who don't have insurance at all, we've got to get into that. And so we have been much more active and involved in Medicaid, for example, sometimes to the consternation of our constituents.
Yeah. So just for the audience at large, I'm sure most people know this, but a 501c3, the allowable activities include charitable work, education, scientific research, religious instruction, issue advocacy and public education, and limited lobbying. And that's what we're talking about right now.
And we do it on issues, not on issues, candidates, not on, and we have champions on both sides of the aisle. Some of our strongest champions have been Republicans in the past. As long as we're on the side of issues, and we are advocating for the issues that matter to people with prostate cancer. And for us in particular, matter to the ones who are most vulnerable of getting prostate cancer and dying from prostate cancer.
Right. So I'm curious, you may or may not know the answer to this, but you know, one of the reasons I think organizations have not fully explored what we can do in terms of lobbying as a 501c3 is because the line is so fuzzy. Form 5768 helps clarify that. Do you guys use that form?
We do. But I will also say, again, for us, it's not that fuzzy.
Okay.
Talk about issues. If you are doing issue work, I mean, we have a lobbying firm we use. I was just on the Hill last week. Issues based. If we were doing nothing but policy work, that might be a different story.
Right.
But we talk to our representatives about issues. And I think I will say that one of the things that we are trying to expand how we think, for those who don't know, ZERO Prostate Cancer was actually founded as the National Prostate Cancer Coalition. And it was modeled after an organization called the National Breast Cancer Coalition, which is primarily an advocacy organization. They have a C3 and a C4. And I will tell you, there are many times where I have looked at my staff and I would say, guys, if we were in breast cancer, they'd be lighting this place on fire. And I think the big difference that we as an organization and other organizations are trying to evolve into is I would say that we did really great government relations work. Again, passed legislation, got funding, really good advocacy work led, by primarily staff, our lobbying firm. And we have a small kind of army of grassroots advocates that are amazing. The problem is in this environment, there aren't enough of them. Yeah. Staff level meetings alone aren't going to get it done. And I think that's where we have to think about, it's not business as usual. I've been on a couple of calls with other organizations at C levels. And I have said to them, how can we apply what we know from the realm of activism to make our issues too hard to ignore? Right now, we are not powerful enough, even as a group. And that goes back to the original point. Chaos is the point, because when there's so much chaos, it is hard to galvanize. It is hard to get attention. It is hard to get people to focus. A lot of people just sort of want to put their head in the sand and not really pay attention. So that chaos is a very specific tactic. Yeah. And it is working.
Yeah. It is. Okay, so go back to what you were saying about, what I think I'm hearing is you have an audience that audience is used to supporting financially the goals of the organization. That's typically what they've done. But you're saying that potentially they could be mobilized as activists. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, no, and I would say actually primarily our constituents, we have we've been doing an advocacy summit every year for years where we go and lobby on the Hill. Yeah. And it's funny because when I arrived, I was like, okay, there's 200 people at this. That's good. I was like, but this is prostate cancer. Like there are over 3 million.
Everybody gets it if you're male. Yeah.
Like, why isn't this 1,000 people?
Yeah.
And again, I came from NBCC where in its prime, I think COVID has changed everything and how we do stuff. There were like 1,000 people there. The discussion was, well, but we don't need that many people because we really need it was a very laser focused kind of, we really need people in the meetings that we need. We don't need all the extra people. And that probably made sense for a long time. We were a smaller organization. It's expensive. We couldn't manage it, that kind of thing. But even before all this happened, I said, no, guys, that's the difference between government relations and sort of little a advocacy and big A advocacy. Because sometimes it's the optics. Sometimes it's the, oh my God, I can't walk through the halls because those damn prostate cancer people are here. And then that gets somebody talking, and then it gets somebody talking. And it's sort of where advocacy and PR become like this, right? And so we had already been talking about how we needed to move from little a advocacy to big A advocacy. And that is sometimes scary because that puts you in front of things more. It opens yourselves up to risk.
Yeah, the kind of risk that that you could open yourself up to, I'm assuming, would be, even though you are legitimately still in 501c3 allowable activities, that doesn't stop them from bringing suit anyway.
Yeah, that's not the risk I'm more concerned about.
So what risk are you discussing?
I'm concerned about risk from our constituents.
Okay, so that they themselves become sensitized or polarized?
No, that we serve all people with prostate cancer, and there are very many of them who actually agree with what's happening compared to our points. I think again, prostate cancer does not discriminate, and there are a lot of things, but as the world has just gotten more partisan. We have some champions on both sides, but when in doubt, they're going to fall in line. Everybody is falling in line. And I think for us, we have constituents that we are trying to serve, where we have constituents that we're trying to reach who, the minute you say we're going to fight to save Medicaid, We have gotten more angry emails in the last 2 weeks that we have gotten more involved in Medicaid.
Interesting. So they are, even though you're focused on policy, they are translating that into a partisan comment.
Well, yeah, and again, it's the talking points. It's even though the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says that these cuts to Medicaid will mean almost 9 million people will be kicked off Medicaid. That is not 9 million people that are using Medicaid fraudulently. It's not 9 million,
Sure.
Undocumented immigrants. It's not 9 million lazy people who won't get jobs. It includes people who have cancer, who are in treatment, who therefore cannot work.
Yeah.
It includes, seniors who are dual eligible, who are retired and don't work.
I want to go back to your little a advocacy to big A advocacy, to restate that, to make sure I've got it. Little A advocacy is pretty much what we did in 2012. It's a very traditional advocacy where we put targeted people with very targeted speaking points in front of specific legislators.
Yeah, and you told
right?
stories, and you went to lobby day, and you
Yep.
signed on to letters.
Yep. Okay. So big A activism or advocacy is really activism, and it is pointed at policy.
Force people to listen to you.
And that's with a big show.
Yeah, and that you gotta, so we saw it earlier when there were a lot of town halls coming on, right? And people showed up. I mean, again, maybe it's my love of Aaron Sorkin, like my love of civic duty. Yes. Like the Grinch, my heart grew that day. That is big A advocacy. That is showing up, performing your civic duty, and asking questions of your leaders and of your representatives. That makes people slightly uncomfortable. I am not here to make people comfortable.
Yeah. So big A advocacy equal activism. So what I'm hearing is that you might not be shy, for example, to asking the people who have typically donated to your cause to go to an event to advocate for that cause.
Yeah.
And in the past, in the world, I've been doing this 36 years. Those lists ne'er the twain shall meet, because everyone was protecting their list.
At Zero, we haven't always done that. I mean, we don't do it all the time. But I did say there were a couple times where, they were like, okay, we have this list of people who have signed up to be advocates. And we did have a conversation where I said, guys, people who signed up to be advocates 3 years ago, and other people who said, nah, I'm not interested in that. We have to offer them an opportunity to see if now they're interested in it, because the world is different. So there are times, for example, where we reached out to our entire list and said, would you like to join us in this, or we've got to do that. I think that is what occasionally has brought on the grumpy emails. But my GR person says, Courtney, the problem we have is I could send an email every day. And I'm not sure that's helpful either. That's a whole discussion about emails and things. And she goes, what I can do though is update the people who say they really care. I can update them way more. So for example, we have a blog where we're doing more stuff on advocacy. We are kind of trying to combat that information. I will be honest, I still don't think we're doing enough.
Okay, let me ask you a question, because you are at heart a fundraiser. You know how to raise money in all different ways. So 1 million years ago, I read a study that was done by the American Cancer Society. And what it said was that donors who engage in a legislative priority activity, their lifetime value in terms of donating was 900% of of a typical donor. So how do you weave that together, to help other executives make the argument for going to big A advocacy, which is activism, and engaging everyone in the organization? Make that argument from a revenue standpoint.
So I'll make that argument from a revenue standpoint first, but I actually don't think this is the problem. But we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
So from a revenue standpoint, first of all, I was taught by an amazing person named Katrina Van Huss that when you ask people to do things, they become closer to you. And even if they say no, the mere fact that you ask them brings them closer to you. Hey, can you do me a favor? Hey, can you do me a favor? Right? Does this sound familiar, Katrina?
It does sound familiar, yes.
2016, Katrina?
Yes.
And so, first of all, asking people to engage in things that is not donating is how you cultivate them for the next ask.
Yes.
And in the old world, that might have been come to an event, be a part of this, see our mission come to life. Sometimes it's sign a pledge or a petition. I mean, there's lots of lead generation tools that are sign the pledge, sign the petition. But advocacy is just another piece of that. Now, a lot of organizations aren't advocacy organizations. So I think for a lot of times they don't have the infrastructure to do that, right? So we do have a government relations team. We do lobby. We do all of these things. But other organizations don't. So they probably haven't included it in some of their asks because they're like, well, what do we do with this information, right? So I would say there's a couple things. One is if you don't have that kind of shop in house, there are plenty of organizations who do. So go speak to your friends and say, hey, well, can we, if we can bring you people, can we hop onto this with you? And the answer is always going to be yes. We always need more people, right? Now, of course, you'll have to realize that means that they're sort of shared people, and you're going to have to get used to that. But these are different times, right? And your people will appreciate that you gave them an opportunity to do something about an issue they feel no control over.
Yes.
So especially in health-related organizations and cancer, right? Like one of the things that we always say for a basic, let's go back to my roots, peer-to-peer fundraising, is why people get involved in peer-to-peer fundraising is because they feel like they have to do something over something they have no control over. Advocacy does the same thing.
Yeah.
You are giving them an opportunity to say like, well, at least I did something. You are giving them an opportunity to do something if perhaps giving the dollars is not something they can do right now.
That's true. I think that's a very good point.
Keeps them in there, and it tells them that they have value beyond just their dollars.
Yes. Let me ask you about fear in leadership. Right? You mentioned briefly
right there. That's
fear in leadership. What do you see happening out there in terms of leadership?
I'll tell a story, right? I was on a call with a bunch of CEOs, and we were talking about how we were going to sign on to letters, and it was business as usual business. And it's interesting because there are some leaders out there who were saying like it can't be business as usual, but it kind of feels like business as usual, right? Like we're going to get our advocates, we're going to sign on to letters, we're going to give them some social media tools to like express them. And I asked the question to the group and I said, so is there something we can learn from other spaces about how they got their people engaged? From the activism community. And I used AIDS, AIDS activism or the women's movement or whatever activist, Greenpeace, whatever, the Sea Shepherds, whatever kind of activist things. Not to say that we're going to run out and, throw blood on things. We're not. But are there things that we can learn from those movements? Because remember, that's a movement, not just a series of actions.
Yep.
And I said, is there something has anybody thought? And because I was like, I don't know, like, has anybody thought to talk to any of those people? What could we learn from them? And it was the longest 45 seconds of absolute silence I've ever had in my life. And finally, somebody raised their hand and they said, I think why nobody's speaking up is because there's fear. And there is fear of our constituents and our donors. And then there was another 30 seconds of absolute silence. And then we sort of moved on from the topic.
So let me ask you this.
To which I said, guys, that's fine. Like, and I spoke honestly. I represent a constituency that is overwhelmingly older men. If you look at the data, that means that my constituency is more likely to believe one way versus another. That is not everyone, by the way. But again, I go back to prostate cancer impacts everyone. And how do we break through the noise to get what we need? And so I said, I understand that completely. And that is a line that I am conscious of every day. But at the same time, me as a person, I have to look in the mirror every day and go, will I be on the right side of history? Yes. And for me, the right side of history is never straying from working for the constituents that we serve. So if my job is to save people from prostate cancer, if there are things that will make it harder for people to live from prostate cancer, then I am on the right side of history.
You are articulating something that almost, and maybe you do it on purpose, binds you to a certain course of action, binds you to taking some risk, makes it almost impossible for you not to take that. You are speaking it and it will manifest because you've spoken it. The field of social psychology says that most people act very differently, that the situation, when they gauge outcomes of potential actions, the first and foremost thing, whether it's spoken out loud or not, is what will happen to me if I do this? How present in that conversation that you described with all the silence was that dynamic?
I do believe in all of the leaders I've talked to. There's not a lot of me that's happening, at least not that's being said. I really think they're concerned for their organization. I think that, when I talk to my own board, right, like when we've expressed some concerns about things, the answer is always the same. If we stay to our mission, if we speak up for our mission, if we try not to kind of go into the, me as Courtney as a person, I may want to do a bunch of things, but if we stay true to our mission, then we can't ever be wrong. We grew 26% last year. I'm not necessarily worried about like losing my job tomorrow if I do the wrong thing. Other organizations who might be in different financial circumstances or leadership circumstances, that might be different, right?
Yeah. So you think the lack of movement is more about, what I do may potentially hurt the organization rather than what I do may lose me my job or get me shot in the parking lot.
And maybe that's naive.
It's hopeful. I like that there are people in the world like you who think that way. Yes. Way to bring me up.
I think they're generally concerned about their organization. And especially those organizations that have federal funding, that have, they have got to behave a little bit differently, because if their organization crumbles, those people who are disenfranchised and underserved and marginalized, then they have even less people to fight for them. Yeah. So it is a hard balance, but I have never, we didn't really think about it this way when we first started working on these core values at ZERO. And they're the first times we've actually done core values that we were very external and they were about everything. We had some core values before that were kind of like more HR, sort of like how we worked as people. But we started on this process last spring. And so it was never more relevant that when we had kind of last fall realized that courage needed to be a value for us.
Yeah.
And it is funny because we brought our entire staff together, mid-January, and we looked at those values of ambition, thinking bigger than we ever have and thinking differently. One of our values is integrity. We have to stay true to our mission. We have to be honest. We have to be transparent. And courage. We have to do hard things. And we have to say the things that need to be said. And we have to speak for those who can't. Those are very specific in that sort of courage mindset.
Yeah.
And I'd love to say that I'm like, the smartest CEO that ever lived. I'm not, but I am more excited than ever. Excited maybe is the wrong word, but that we landed on that, because everything that we have done in the last 4 months, we have gone back to these core values. Is it ambitious? Is it courageous? Are we thinking of it with inclusion? Inclusion is one of our values, which means we are here for everyone and everyone has value. It is empathy. We are inherently, we believe in support. We believe in thinking about those people, right? And integrity. We go back to all of those values. And that would be my sort of thing that I would my call to action to anybody. And sometimes people think that like mission, vision, core values is kind of crap and it just goes in a drawer. There is never a better time than right now to revisit your organizational core values and say, are they still serving us? Yep. And can we use them as the North Star in everything we do? Because that's my shield. Like as a CEO, my board, my mission, my core values, those are my shields. So those are the things that when we get the arrows, I can hide behind or pop my head up from and go, no, 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 no. And our core values were developed with our constituents, with our board, with our staff, with volunteers, with donors, with champions. And those are the things, if we use those as our guiding light, that we are serving the people. So we have a new mission statement. And our mission statement is that, prostate cancer is detected early, support is unwavering, and care is accessible to all. If we are staying true to those things, then we are not in the wrong.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Pretend you had all the money in the world and there were no silly barriers in front of you. How would you translate big A, advocacy equal to activism into action? What does that look like? What are 10 things that you would say, okay, next year, and given that we have unlimited funds and I have unlimited power, this is what we're going to do?
We have got to think where advocacy and media collide. At Zero, we have invested in marketing communications in a way we have never invested before. I would be using media in a very for-profit way. And I would throw all the money at the agencies who do that to help us. Yeah. I would also double down on the mission work. If I had all the money in the world, and we don't have all the money in the world, but we did get one of our largest gifts ever in the past year.
Yeah.
Because big ideas and big mission drive money. And so I would think, instead of trying to get small and be like, how can we kind of get through? Or how can I had a call with a very powerful CEO recently who said, well, I think we just got to like ride it out and see how it all shakes out. And that was built with a bunch of contingency plans and things like that. But if I had all the money in the world, I would double down on my mission. I mean, we just launched a huge investment into doing pilot markets where the greatest need, it's a $20 million commitment over 3 years. I would spend hundreds of $1 million and I would move it faster and I would do it. And because if you are leading with mission, you are never wrong.
Yeah. All right. We're going to wrap it on that because I think that is a perfect ending. Thank you, Courtney Bugler, CEO of ZERO Prostate Cancer, and my good friend from many years. And
many years. I still got a camp chair from you in the garage somewhere from maybe 2006.
That's funny. That's too funny. All right, my friend. Thank you so much. This was great. Perfect. All right. Bye-bye. Bye.